talk about fat more in depth as it relates to the interior of the human body and why we should be paying more attention to that versus just trying to get a six pack for the summer.
To your point about most people's experience looking and assessing their own fat in the mirror, the vast majority of people that are looking at that fat are going to be looking at the fat that's actually, believe it or not, beneficial and protective. So what I'll do is to kind of explain the difference between the fat that you might have inside your body versus the fat that you might be seeing. Is we'll look at this image here, and we'll do some MRI scans, what we do with our client patients. So we do MRI scanning in the axial or transverse plane. So it creates an image behind my head here, like this, sort of like a pizza. Right here is kind of where the belly button is, the anterior part of your abdomen. These dark structures down here are your back muscles. So you kind of lay in on your back, go into a scanner, in an MRI scanner, and fat is white and muscle is dark. So we can start interpreting these scans based on these colors. So when you look at the fat on the outside of your body, what you're really looking at is this fat here, subcutaneous fat. And oftentimes it's the fat that is the inch that you can pinch or that kind of hangs off you. Now, to be sure, some people have more of that fat than others. And as a result, they may look heavier, but it's the fat that's inside your body here. And we paint it red up in this image here, visceral fat. And the other term I like to use to describe it is invisible obesity. So it's a state of obesity and fat inside your body that's invisible. Until you get an MRI scan, you can't see it. There's other ways to detect it, like a DEXA scan. But the DEXA scan, when it scans you, uses radiation, which I'm not a super fan of. And it also numerically quantifies the amount of visceral fat instead of allowing you to image your visceral fat. So the human being that sees how much visceral fat they have inside is better informed and better educated about that visceral fat to do something about it. So the red is really bad. The yellow is superficial subcutaneous fat. And really the important thing is to understand that there's even greater details that are available. That was an older image. So here we have visceral fat, all this white stuff in here. But the dark structures here, these are the erectae spinae muscles. So they keep your spine erect. And see the white streaks in there, Doug, that are being deposited within these muscles. At the time that this scan was taken, this individual, their muscles did not have the white streaks in them. But eventually, as that visceral fat accumulates and its influence, that fat starts going into the erectae spinae muscles. And then this is what happens to a human being. They get a curved spine. Their back muscles don't work as well. And I'm going to tip my head. I have dyslexia, so I have a hard time. So there is his pectoralis major muscle right here, the tip of my pointer. And his pectoralis muscle is sagging because not visceral fat, but fat, inflammatory fat, is replacing his muscle just like it was replacing in his back muscles and indeed all over his body. And so it compromises your muscularity, of which every single muscle in your body has a role. So you do not want to have all this fat in your muscles. And the same with you can see these fatty streaks being deposited in the obliques. And now you can see more nicely the belly button region up here. And so visceral fat and fatty muscle replacement, the medical term for this, if you're listening and you're kind of a science geek, and that's a good thing, is myosteatosis, myosteatosis, which is just muscle fat. So fat within the muscle that's inflammatory. And the reason your muscles don't work so well when you're older is not because you're older and aging. It's because you're more diseased. And we can see this disease through use of an MRI and not a DEXA scan. DEXA scan will not permit evaluation for this. So the informed follower of your podcast, Doug, will take note right now and say, I want to find out about this dangerous fat within my muscle and fat within my abdomen that's causing this. The third fat that I'll bring to your attention is lumped together. Very many people think fat is fat. So visceral fat is not the same. Myosteatosis is not the same as superficial subcutaneous fat. So from this black line here, there's a membrane there called scarpus fascia. And that membrane is separating this subcutaneous tissue into two compartments. And physicians don't know this, but now your followers are learning this. These two compartments are very, very different. So from that black line to the muscles is deep subcutaneous fat, and it behaves just like the muscle fat and the visceral fat. It's highly inflammatory, causes disease like heart attacks, strokes, obesity, dementia, neurodegenerative conditions, hepatosteatosis or fatty liver disease, diabetes, and even obesity. But this fat in the superficial subcutaneous compartment does just the opposite. It protects you from obesity, protects you from diabetes, protects you from dying from heart attacks and strokes. So I like to say superficial subcutaneous fat, that little tiny layer there, is sort of like a bulletproof vest. It protects you against the harmful accumulation of disease within your body. But precious few people know about it. So the reason why this is protective, superficial subcutaneous fat, is it has I like to call it an A word. And there's two A words. So if you are fortunate to be tuning in today and listening to this show, write this word down. It's called adiponectin, adiponectin. And adiponectin is one of those words that big healthcare, big medicine, and big pharma do not want you to know about or do anything with it. So if you have more adiponectin, you protect yourself from disease, and you want that. So you do not want to be stripping away through a liposuction, removing your beneficial superficial subcutaneous fat. And when sadly it's mostly women do that, they report that their health has deteriorated. And very interesting that I did not realize, they self-reported that their faces became less attractive. So adiponectin and superficial subcutaneous fat makes your face more attractive. And I'll quickly pull up a picture of this to kind of give you an example of this. Is in the olden days, the Renaissance artists would paint kind of cherubic figures, and they had very effeminate faces. And they were drawn to them because they were healthy and pretty. But if you strip that away, and I'm not going to show images, you can jump on Google and say women with abs, women with six packs. Look at their faces. Very often they have very harsh, masculinized looking faces, and I call them dude faces. And they lose their pretty feminine look, and it's through the influence of the loss of adiponectin, and maybe some of them are also deteriorating their looks because they take gear or some other hormone or steroid or something. But you want this adiponectin in your body to protect you. So not all fat is the same. We just mentioned three bad players that cause harm, that cause disease, and in fact are deadly. And you want to be aware of it. And then a quick example, just to highlight a little bit more the connection between visceral fat and muscle fat. We showed you in the muscles of the abdomen, but you can also see that in legs. So when we scan legs and abdomens together, these legs belong to this fellow right here. This abdomen belongs to these legs right here. You can see that the image up here, there's much more fatty streaks in these legs. And just ask yourself, how well would this person sprint or run or even, walk or get up out of a couch? And that's, the presence of disease slowly is replacing that muscle with that fat. And so the more visceral fat you have in your scan, the more fat you're going to have in your muscles. So there's that strong correlation. People need to be aware of this.
So let's just say the average person is listening to this or they're watching this and they're starting to like digest a lot of what you said, and they're like taking a look at themselves and they're like, oh, maybe I have some visceral fat. Like how do I know? Like what are some of the signs that somebody has more visceral fat than they need, like outside of going to get an MRI? Like what are some of the early warning signs?
Yeah. So one of the things you can do, and I call it a poor man's MRI, is these are areas of the body hanging off your back called love handles. So if you have love handles, it's very often the case, especially males, that you're going to have a large percentage of that is going to be deep subcutaneous fat. And we have seen in thousands of people the correlation between this deep subcutaneous fat with visceral fat. So it's never the case that you have a bunch of this without having a bunch of this, unless you've had liposuction and temporarily you may, eliminate this deep subcutaneous fat. So a quick and easy assessment of to infer, not reliably calculate, but to infer how much visceral fat can be gleaned from just an evaluation of your love handles. Maybe take a photograph of your back and see if you have love handles down there. And the other thing is, you can assess this in faces. So here is my face from age 48 when I had a large amount of visceral fat, probably, an average amount for a 48-year-old. But what is important to pay attention to is my weight here is 165, and today I weigh, I think it was 176. Here in this photograph, I'm sorry, in this photograph here, I'm 178. So it's not your weight, it's the type of tissue that defines how healthy you are. And people tell me I don't even look like the same individual. So visceral fat just causes facial inflammation. And what is facial inflammation? What do I mean by that? It causes an edematous, kind of swollen look. It's fuller, and there is a loss of facial features. If you look at younger people in their 20s or teenagers, they have very defined facial features. And with visceral fat, you lose that facial definition and your face has this inflamed look. And this is important because our faces become proxies of how healthy we are. And so there's a biological, a real significant advantage, Doug, to human beings that are healthier because people's brains have what's called imprinting, which is kind of a biological software system that has been passed down vestigially from our previous ancestors that tell us about what's important, such as even if you've never experienced better, if you grew up in the desert and you've never experienced heights, if we put you on a cliff, it would be imprinting that would teach you move away from that edge. Same thing with fire, things along those lines. And imprinting tells you, gives you the capacity to evaluate the face of a human being for its level of health, and more importantly, therefore, its ability, that particular human, to help you either survive or thrive. So, to the man or woman who becomes aware of visceral fat, if they eliminate it, they'll improve their appearance and they will increase their influence within the species. So they will become better leaders, better social media influencers, better podcasters, better CEOs, better coaches, better husbands, wives, whatever they do, they'll become better at it, better performing, and very interesting, more influential. And so you don't want to just live your life for yourself. We're here to help each other out. We're on a mission. And so I try to get my clients and I try to attract clients that are interested in becoming better biological influencers so that they can share and influence other people to live more healthy. So the final answer would be photographs. Get a picture of your face today and compare it to your face 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and you will see that is likely you have been accumulating visceral fat because your face has become more inflamed and more prominent. And an example of this happening could be seen in Sinead O'Connor when she was in her 20s in the photograph, and then her photograph a little bit before she died, unfortunately. You can see the influence of a visceral fat adiposity causing inflammation and the loss of her very attractive, leaner, finer features of her face when she was in her 20s. So it's abundantly, ubiquitously available on the internet and in your life if you just pay attention to it. But we're getting so accustomed to this kind of a face that people are kind of becoming accepting of an inflamed face along with a large, corpulent, obese body. So I love podcasts that talk about how to challenge that.
So how can somebody differentiate whether or not the weight gain in somebody's face is just as a result of somebody like becoming heavier, like their body weight increasing versus it being just visceral fat?
Interesting for women, you can look at the face. So here's a model. Let me move move out of this face. So there's an attractive, pretty face behind there. So I can tell looking at that individual's face that they don't have a lot of influence of visceral fat. Now, you could dump in a ton of visceral fat inside their body, but the influence from the chemokines, those inflammatory molecules, will not have destroyed her face just yet. So she's attractive compared to Sinead O'Connor, who accumulated visceral fat and her face unfortunately degraded, it deteriorated. But let's look at this in this model's face who was on this, I think it was 2022. Yeah, 2022 Sports Illustrated swimsuit edition cover. Look at her body. So her body is quite heavy, but I would submit to you, Doug, that she really resembles, she would be typical of the type of model that would be photographed, or not photographed, but painted and maybe sculpted during the Renaissance period of art, because she has an abundance of superficial subcutaneous fat that's beneficial and protective, and she does not, were we to scan her, I would posit that she would not have much, if any, visceral fat, and certainly not for a long time because it hasn't yet deteriorated her face. So, tracking your face and your body timeline over a period of time can give you an idea to unravel how much potential influence these inflammatory molecules from these dangerous fat depots may have played in your lifetime. So there are people that have preserved their faces for a long time and look pretty good. And those would be people, in fact, take a moment to show an example of that. Somebody like this Instagram model has a big following, Karen LaBoucherie. She has over 600,000 followers, and she has an attractive torso, an attractive figure. She has a pretty face. If we could blow that up, her face is attractive, and she's photographed all over the world in attractive things. And look how nice and healthy her hair is. But Carolyn is just about, if she hasn't already, to turn 60. So this is an older but very attractive, but I would say very healthy woman, because she has eaten no processed food. She's been on a low carbohydrate Atkins diet, and this is what her MRI scan looks like. I called her up and convinced her to get an MRI scan. I'm a researcher from Hello. I'm a researcher from America. She lives in Dubai. She's British, and she agreed to get this MRI scan. And you can see that she's mostly muscle and internal organs inside of her. and she doesn't look anything like those other images that I was previously showing. So you can look at your body, you can look at lines, you can look at your face, and really, if you've lost your attraction since you were a teenager or in your 20s, it's because of visceral fat. Visceral fat has released those inflammatory molecules, causing your body to lose its attractiveness, and with it, your health. You'll have declining health.